Hey folks, welcome back to the weekly wrap-up alongside Danny Nguyen. I'm Ben Carpine. We have 5 new cards to show you guys today, so we're just going to jump right in as always. To start off, we have Mr. Joe Mullins of the St. Louis Blues and a couple of other organizations in the NHL. But this is a character who I think is a very interesting NHL player. He started out in New York State, born and raised, played at Boston College actually, and as a collegiate hockey player, so right down the street from us essentially. But went undrafted in 1981. Now, this is mostly because, in the early 80s, you're going through a period where they're not really looking for American hockey players. Eastern European, you have Sweden, Finland, they're all producing these really stellar hockey players. And as far as American involvement in the National Hockey League, it wasn't really quite there. So he goes undrafted, but he signs with the St. Louis Blues in 1981. And from there starts a 16-year career where he really was able to accomplish quite a lot. He's a 3-time Stanley Cup winner, NHL Hall of Famer just 3 years after his retirement. You'll notice that this card in particular isn't actually from a specific year. It's just a kind of a summary of his whole entire NHL career. So that's why I'm not going to go too specifically into any stats from a certain year. I'm just going to kind of give more of a summary of Mr. Mullins' career in general. But NHL Hall of Famer for the last couple years, and to me, I think this is a really cool card, mostly because it's a statement to me. I think when you have an undrafted player who goes on to become a superstar in any league, it's really just an awesome David versus Goliath story, and it's another example of it right there when you have Joe Mullins on the screen. So that's, I think, as much as I can talk about numbers-wise. Danny, about the card itself, what are we looking at?
Oh, so the card's condition looks nice. I don't see any nicks or anything. The auto looks fine. The background makes the color of his jersey pop out. The yellow and the blue looks perfect. The set, I don't know about. That probably means that, one, it's not a good set. You don't want to go for those. Usually for hockey, you want to go for Upper Deck or Leaf and any others. What do you consider for your rating, Ben?
Danny, I actually really like the way that this card looks, and I also like Joe Mullins' story, and for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and give this card an 8.5 to start out the day. I do agree with you. I think that the St. Louis Blues, the blue and yellow retro jerseys, I think that really pops out to me. I think the signature is very clean. And when you just look at the back of the card, it's very neatly organized. To me, this card is a very solid 8.5, and honestly, to me, nearing a 9 out of 10. I like this one a lot. Danny, what are you thinking?
For my rating, I'm gonna give it an 8.5. The card looks nice. I don't know a lot about hockey, but I'm actually starting to get into it a little more. Watching the Bruins, although they did lose 4-2 against the Panthers. But overall, that's my rating. What's our next card, Ben?
So staying in the NHL, you notice that that's a bit of a trend today. We are going to move off of Joe Mullen, and we are going to head over to Jari Kurri of the Edmonton Oilers. Now, Jari Kurri, the New York Times calls this guy an all-time draft day steal. This is a guy who, again, just like Joe Mullins, wasn't really anticipated to be as good as he was, and he came out and just absolutely blew up the NHL. He's drafted in the 4th round, pick 69 overall in 1980 by the Edmonton Oilers. And at that time period, if you're an NHL avid watcher, you'll notice at that time period, Mr. Wayne Gretzky was also on the Edmonton Oilers. So you have the best hockey player of all time, and now you have Jari Kurri playing with them as well. Now, Jari Kurri from Finland, and we talked about how the NHL at this time was looking for non-American players, so Jari Kurri definitely fits that description. Edmonton, he played there from 1980 to 1990, that's 10 years there, and he retired in 1998 as a 5-time Stanley Cup winner, all of them with Edmonton and Wayne Gretzky, obviously. In 2001, he's also a Hall of Fame inductee himself, and again, a card not from a certain year, so really more of a general summation of the card. I won't talk about how it looks quite yet, Danny. That's more your job, but I really like the way that this card looks, and Jari Kurri, a hugely influential player. One of the main reasons why the Edmonton Oilers were able to win so many Stanley Cups is because of the help of guys like Jari Kurri, right? It's not all Wayne Gretzky. You have to have that supporting cast of players, and Jari Kurri, definitely one of those players. Danny, what are you thinking?
So the card looks nice. The black background works well with the colors of his jersey. It pops out, makes his picture look very nice. His picture looks really nice. Sorry, I repeated that. But the auto looks nice. The condition, almost good. There's one nick you can see in the upper corner. I don't see any splotches on the back or anything. What do you consider for your rating?
Danny, when you take into account all things considered, you have a 17-year career, Hall of Fame inductee, and when you're talking about the card, I personally love the Edmonton Oilers uniform. I think it's my favorite in the NHL, maybe only behind the Boston Bruins, and I just love the way that the colors contrast with the bright orange and blue. It's actually the colors on my bedroom wall, if you believe it or not because of Edmonton, but just by random chance. I really like the way that it looks. I like the signature on it, and I think that the colors just work well together, especially with that gold outline that you can see there on the front. I'm going to go ahead and give this card the exact same rating that I just gave, 8.5. However, I would not be teetering on a 9. I would think I'd be more between an 8 and an 8.5. On the lower side of 8 rather than on the upper side. Danny, what are you thinking on this card?
For my rating, I'm gonna give it a 9. The black background works perfect with the card. It makes his color of his jersey pop out. The auto looks nice. I don't see any nicks or anything besides the upper corner. But yeah, that's my rating. What's the next one, Ben?
So again, Danny, we're going to stay in the NHL, moving off Jari Kurri, and we are going to head over to a bit more recent player, Nicklas Lidstrom. Nicklas Lidstrom. This card is actually our first card that is from a particular year. This card is from the 2008-9 NHL season. And in this season, he had a pretty good stat line, 16 goals, 43 assists for a total of 59 points. That's a pretty good year by NHL standards points-wise. In this year, he was a league all-star for a defenseman. He's a first-teamer, so definitely a very stellar season when you're talking about his numbers in 2008-9. But if we're going to talk about Nicklas Lidstrom in the past, because obviously this card, we're kind of going over retro players today, and we want to talk about his whole career, not just the 08-09 season. He was drafted round 3, pick 53 overall in 1989 from Sweden. He played drafted to the Detroit Red Wings, where he played his entire career. He played professionally from 1991 until 2012. You notice that 2-year gap. He played in the AHL. 4-time Stanley Cup winner, 7-time Norris Trophy winner. That's essentially the Defensive Player of the Year award in the NHL. And he retired in 2012, as I already had mentioned. And his jersey number 5, retired by the Detroit Red Wings just a couple years later. So this is a guy who very clearly has left his mark in Detroit. And the city really can't thank enough of their success to Nicklas Lidstrom. So as far as statistically talking, this is a very, very integral player to the Detroit Red Wings, and as of that, I'm going to be rating this card very high in a moment. Danny, what are you thinking on this card?
So the card looks really nice. I don't see any marks or nicks or any loves marks a single bit on it. The patch looks nice. The auto looks nice. It's number 75, low population. The colors match well, matches with his jersey. The shield around it, I don't know what to say about it, but it looks really nice. What's your rating about it, Ben?
Danny, I'm going to give this card a 9. I think the NHL in general has a very good ability to create jerseys, and when you hear about right now the MLB's having a disaster with the Fanatics jerseys, and in the NHL, I feel like they always seem to get it right, whether it's Adidas or Reebok, and I really like the way that these jerseys look, in particular for Lidstrom's Red Wings jersey. But I really like the jersey patch on there. I think the red and white go very well together. You got the silver emblem on the front. This is a very nice looking card. You have the signature on there too, and not to mention, Nicklas Lidstrom is a highly important player for the Detroit Red Wings, and as a result of that, I'm going to be giving this card a 9. Danny, what are you thinking?
For my rating, I'm also going to give it a 9. It looks very good. The shield looks perfect with it. The patch, the auto looks well. I don't see any marks, like I said. The logo on the left corner, of the patch looks nice. What's our next card, Ben?
So again, moving off Lidstrom right here, and we are going to head over to, at least as Boston fans, someone that we would know very well, and that is Bobby Orr. Now, Bobby Orr, this is a guy that most Boston Bruins fans, longtime Bruins fans, could talk about for a very, very long time, and with very good reason. The picture of the flying goal that he had against the St. Louis Blues in 1974 Stanley Cup Finals is one of the most influential NHL photos, I think, of all time. You got him flying in the air after he finally was able to sweep the St. Louis Blues, and it's a really cool picture. It's actually hanging up in my house. I think we have it signed somewhere. It's a very, very cool photo to look at. But Bobby Orr, again, this is not a card from a specific season. This is kind of a card that goes over his entire career. Bobby Orr played from 1966 to 1976. That's a 10-year career right there. 8-time Norris Trophy winner. That's 8 consecutive seasons, by the way. That is the longest streak of winning the Norris Trophy that has ever happened in the NHL. And again, the Norris Trophy is that Defensive Player of the Year award. Two-time Stanley Cup winner with the Boston Bruins, retired in 1979 after a little bit of a shakeup. He left the Boston Bruins, and then, that's really kind of all I have to say, I think, about Bobby Orr's career. To me, it's a short but sweet career. Bobby Orr, without question, one of the most talked about Boston Bruins of all time. He's up there with guys like Ray Bourque, and I would say now, you got Zdeno Chara and Patrice Bergeron if you want to go a little bit more recently. But Bobby Orr, one of the most influential Bruins of all time. Probably the reason why the Bruins were able to get out of the goalie that they had hit in the 50s and 60s and kind of go back into relevance in the 1970s. But Bobby Orr, statistically speaking, a very sound player. Danny, if we're going to talk about the card, what are we looking at today?
So I don't see any marks on the corners or anything. The card itself has a nice background to it. You can see some of the squares from the left corner. The auto looks nice. And Bobby Orr himself is probably one of the best Bruins to come out. Best Bruin player to come out of Boston. He was actually my first player I knew coming from Boston when I started to get into hockey. I don't see any marks from the back of it. What do you think about it, Ben?
Danny, I love Bobby Orr. What I will say is the card, to me, it looks a little bit dated on the front, but it's not so detracting that it takes away from the value of the card for me. I'm going to give this card back to an 8.5. Bobby Orr, this is just another example as a Boston player. I'm sure I have the Boston bias, but he's one of the reasons why we call the 617 the City of Champions, right? Bobby Orr is the reason why the Boston Bruins were able to dig their way out of the slow times they had hit in the 50s and 60s, and that's why I'm going to give this card an 8.5. And I would give it a little bit higher, I think, if the card was just a bit more pleasing to look at, but to me it's just a little bit dated, and that detracts just a bit from it. But Danny, what about you?
I'm actually going to give it a 9.5 for my rating. The car looks nice, even though it might look a little dated. It's Bobby Orr, probably one of the best Bruins, like I stated. It just looks nice. Everything is almost perfect, and that's my rating. What's the last card, Ben?
So our final card, Danny, we're going to move out of the NHL and go to the National Football League, and we're going to move on to a longtime Washington Redskin, of course, now the Washington Commanders, Mr. Joe Theismann. Now, Joe Theismann, I think, is kind of well known for a negative reason, and that was because in 1985, he was injured pretty severely by Lawrence Taylor. His legs had snapped in half. I was actually watching it earlier today, just kind of by random chance on TikTok. It had popped up on my For You page, and it's definitely one of the most harrowing reasons or videos that I've seen in the NFL. One of the reasons why NFL safety is taken so seriously today as compared to how it was in the 1980s. But I don't want to hang his head on that because Joe Theismann had a very successful career. Won Super Bowl 17 versus the Miami Dolphins, and that was sometime in the 1970s. To be completely honest, I couldn't tell you, but. Super Bowl 17 won. He also lost a Super Bowl in his career. Drafted round 4 overall, 99th pick out of Miami from Notre Dame, which you can see on this card. He is wearing that Notre Dame jersey. And, he was having a very successful career up until he was injured by Lawrence Taylor and the New York Giants. And as far as I can talk about this card, I think Joe Theismann's most influential reason for being as well known as he is because of his injury, and it's kind of a negative aspect of football. But when you look back at some of the most influential players in the NFL, even today, you look at guys like Antonio Brown. Well, why is Antonio Brown so popular? Because everyone says he has CTE. It's the same with Joe Theismann. Why is Joe Theismann so popular? It's because his leg snapped in half on national television, and it's unfortunate, but that's just kind of the way that I think people remember these things. So Joe Theismann, a very talented football quarterback, but remembered by kind of one moment in his career. But Danny, if we're going to talk about the card right now, about what we're looking at, what are you thinking?
So the card itself looks really nice. I love the green background. The autograph has his number on it. That's usually a little speck that people don't look at. The card condition looks okay. There are some nicks in each corner. But either way, he's a great QB in general. Like you stated about how players are known for a negative reason, there's tons of others, like recently in the NFL, Damar Hamlin suffering cardiac arrest. That's another way we know that a player is good or bad from. But, yeah, everything in the card just looks nice. What's your rating about it?
Danny, this is probably my favorite card today. I really like the way that the colors match. You got the green on there, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish colors right there. You got the nice green. I really like the picture that they use for Joe Theismann. It's a college picture, as I mentioned earlier. The signature is really clean. This is this card checks, again, a lot of boxes for me, and I'm going to have to go ahead and give this card a 9.5. I really, really enjoy looking at this card. It's kind of eye candy, and Joe Theismann should be remembered for more than just his injury because he was a very skilled quarterback, and it's just unfortunate that he's remembered for what he was, but I still think worthy of a 9.5. Danny, how about you?
For my rating, I'm going to give it a 9. The card just looks really nice, but there are some specs, like how it's a college uniform. Usually for collectors, you don't want to invest in that. You want to go for the actual NFL uniform, and there's some nicks on it. But either way, it's a really great card. It's Joe Theismann, a great QB, and just the background works perfectly.
Well, that about wraps it up for this 7th episode of the Weekly Wrap-Up. Again, I'm Ben Carpine alongside Danny Nguyen. We want to thank you for watching this episode of the Weekly Wrap-Up, and we will be back again next week. Thank you very much, and we will see you again soon.